They labeled her a murderer, a loaded weapon that needed to be put down for the safety of everyone on the ranch. But when a boy who had lost everything stared into the eyes of a creature that frightened grown men, he didn't see a monster. He saw a reflection. What occurs when two spirits, both wounded by the same terrible event, meet in the shadows. You are about to discover a story of devastating loss, a perilous secret hidden within a storm, and a redemption so profound it will steal your breath. The heat was always the first thing to return, a heavy, clinging phantom warmth that pressed against his skin even on the coldest, darkest nights. This was not a comforting warmth. It was invasive, a solid weight that made it difficult for his lungs to fill. Then came the sound, the awful, splintering crack of timber surrendering, a noise like the backbone of the world snapping in two. Finally, the smell, sharp and chemical. The scent of burning hay, melting tack, and pure panic, coating the back of his throat, refusing to ever wash away. 16-year-old Ezra Bennett bolted upright in bed, his chest heaving, his shirt soaked in a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. He gasped for air, his fingers digging into the unfamiliar quilt, trying desperately to anchor himself in the here and now. He was not in Kentucky. He was not in the burning barn. He was in a drafty guest room on a Montana ranch, with peeling floral wallpaper and a window that chattered in the relentless prairie wind. He sat for a long while, listening to the house's heavy silence. It was a different quiet from the peaceful one back home. This quiet felt like holding your breath. He rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the tight scar on his palm from grabbing a hot latch that night, a permanent reminder. Ezra swung his feet to the rough pine floorboards, the cold shock helping to ground him. He did not speak. His voice felt like a rusted machine, seized up from lack of use and an ocean of grief. To open his mouth felt to risk an endless scream. His father, David, once a man who filled rooms with laughter and stories, had become a hollow ghost. Sending Ezra to his Aunt Claire's struggling horse rescue in the vast Montana emptiness had been a desperate act. A way to get the boy away from the ashes, even if his father could not escape them himself. Ezra walked to the window, pressing his forehead to the cold glass. Below, the dark shapes of Paddock stretched out like bruised patches on the earth. This was not the high-end training facility of his youth. Aunt Claire's second chance equine rescue was a place held together by baling twine, duct tape, and stubborn hope. The fences laned, the paint peeled. It was a sanctuary for the broken, run by a woman slowly drowning in debt, but refusing to let go of the lifeline she offered others. He stared at the empty fields. He hated horses now. He hated their smell, the sound of their hooves, the very idea of them. They were the reason his mother was gone. They were the beautiful, terrible creatures that had demanded her life as the price for their safety. She had run back into the burning barn for them. She had always put them first, and now the world was empty without her. The next morning arrived under a steely grey sky that promised rain but delivered only a biting wind. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and strong coffee. Aunt Claire stood by the stove, her greying hair in a messy bun, wearing a flannel shirt that had seen better days. She looked bone-tired, carrying a weight that never lightened. A stack of envelopes with red urgent stamps sat on the counter. She moved them under a dish towel when Ezra entered, but he had seen them. "Morning, Ez," she said with forced brightness that turned his stomach. She scraped blackened bits from a piece of toast. "Dr. Hart is coming by later, got a new horse. State troopers seized a mare from a place 2 counties over. Sounds like a rough case." Ezra sat at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with his fork. He did not respond or meet her eyes. If he looked, he would see his mother's eyes staring back, and he could not handle that today. "I could use a hand with the gate when the trailer gets here," Claire pressed gently, placing a plate of eggs before him. "You don't have to touch the horse." Ezra shook his head sharply. He stood, the chair legs scraping loudly, leaving the food untouched. He walked out the whining screen door and sat on the porch steps, pulling his knees to his chest, trying to hold himself together. He watched the horizon, feeling like he was waiting, though he didn't know for what. The morning dragged, heavy and dull. Then, around noon, the crunch of heavy tires on gravel broke the silence. A battered stock trailer, pulled by a truck puffing black smoke, rumbled up the long drive. The rig looked like it had driven through a war. Even from the porch, Ezra could hear the violent metallic thuds from inside the trailer. The animal wasn't restless, it was fighting the walls. Dr. James Hart's truck followed. The vet, a thick-set man weathered by 50 Montana winters, climbed out, his expression grim. He offered no wave. "Claire, keep back," Dr. Hart warned, his voice tight. He grabbed a long whip and a sedative pole from his truck. The trooper said she nearly took a deputy's arm off. "She's not just wild, she's homicidal." Ezra watched from the porch, a cold curiosity stirring. The jittery trailer driver hopped out, eager to be done. "I'm telling you, Doc," the driver said, spitting into the dirt. "It was pitch black in that canyon when we rounded her up. Smoke everywhere, we just grabbed what was moving." The driver unlatched the rear door and scrambled back as if from a live grenade. For a moment, nothing. Then, with a scream that sounded more like a woman in agony than a horse, a creature exploded from the darkness. She was an Appaloosa mare, her coat a chaotic mix of white and dark speckles like a shattered storm cloud. But it was the scar that seized your attention, a jagged, hairless burn mark trailing down her left flank, pink and angry. It was a map of pure pain. Instant chaos erupted. The mare didn't run, she turned and struck the trailer fender with her hooves, sending sparks flying. She spun, kicking out, searching for a target. Claire screamed. In the dust and confusion, Ezra saw a flicker of movement. Something small and low darted from the trailer, slipping under the mare's legs. A blur of brown shadow bolted for the far corner of the paddock, vanishing into dense, overgrown brambles. Ezra blinked, he thought, but then the mare screamed again, rearing over Dr. Hart, and the thought vanished. Dr. Hart shouted, trying to drive her toward the gate. The mare lunged, teeth bared, not bluffing. Dr. Hart barely dodged, slipping in the mud. The mare held her ground at the gate, refusing to move deeper, fighting inch by inch as if guarding the entrance. Claire yelled. Finally, through sheer force, they pushed her back just enough to slam the heavy bolt home. Sweating and pale, Dr. Hart managed to jab a sedative needle through the bars. He leaned against the fence, gasping, then took a zip tie and attached a bright red sign to the gate. In thick, angry letters he wrote, "Dangerous." "I'm sorry, Claire," Dr. Hart said, wiping his forehead with a shaking hand. "I can't sign off on this one. She's mentally gone. That's not a horse, that's a loaded weapon. I've seen abuse, but this is different." Claire's face crumbled. "We can't just give up on her, James." "I'm scheduling euthanasia for Friday," Hart said, his voice final. "I can't let you near her, it's a liability. Give her a few days to settle so we can do it humanely." Ezra, still on the porch, felt a strange vibration in his chest. He stood and walked slowly down the steps. He looked at the mare. She stood in the center of the paddock, sides heaving, foam dripping, swaying from the sedative but refusing to lie down. She kept her head up, scanning the perimeter like a soldier surrounded, waiting for the next attack. Ezra knew that look. He felt it every time he opened his eyes. The days until Friday were a blur of gray tension. Ezra avoided the house, hovering near the isolation paddock, always watching. He saw things others didn't. The mare, whom he called Stormy in his head, wouldn't eat her grain until she checked the far corner of the pen. She flinched not at movement, but at sound. It was Thursday night, the eve of the execution. The house was quiet. Ezra lay in bed, but the pull was too strong. He pulled on his boots and slipped outside into the crisp, still night. He walked silently to the paddock. The mare was there, not sleeping. She charged the fence line, ears pinned, teeth snapping, a warning that vibrated in Ezra's bones. Ezra didn't flinch. He stood, hands in pockets, letting her rage wash over him. He understood it. The desire to lash out, to hurt the world before it could hurt you again. "They say you're a monster," Ezra whispered. The sound of his own unused voice startled him, rough like gravel. They said the fire was an accident, he continued, stepping an inch closer. The mare flinched but didn't strike. They told me I should be grateful I survived. They said my mom was a hero. The mare stopped pacing. She stood rigid, head high, nostrils flaring as she scented the boy. She was listening not to the words but to the tone, a tone devoid of fear, a tone of shared sorrow. "I know you're not mean," Ezra said, his voice cracking, a tear hot on his cold cheek. "I know you're just scared. I'm scared too. I'm scared all the time. I'm scared I'll forget." Her voice. Slowly, impossibly, the tension drained from the mare's neck. Moonlight broke through, illuminating her face. Her wide, panicked eyes softened. She lowered her head, took a hesitant step forward, and stretched her neck toward the boy on the other side of the barrier. Ezra raised a trembling hand. He didn't try to pet her. He just pressed his palm flat against the wire mesh. The mare pressed her velvet nose against the wire directly over his hand. She exhaled a long, warm breath that fogged in the night air. It was a surrender, a recognition. In the Montana night, two broken things had found the jagged edges of each other and realized they fit. Ezra closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her breath, and for the first time in 6 months he did not feel alone. Friday morning arrived with the heaviness of a funeral. Dr. M. Sharp. He stepped out carrying the black medical bag that meant endings. Ezra was already at the paddock, sitting in a rusted lawn chair directly in front of the gate, arms crossed, immovable as a boulder. "Ezra, son, you need to move," Dr. Hart said gently. "This horse is dangerous. She's a liability." Ezra didn't move. He just stared, his eyes burning with a fierce, silent accusation. "You don't see her." Aunt Claire came running from the house. She saw the standoff, the grim vet and the defiant boy. She called breathlessly. She looked at Ezra, really looked at him for the first time in months. She saw the set of his jaw, the life in his eyes that had been absent since the funeral. This was a boy fighting for something. Look at him. He hasn't cared about anything since Kentucky. "Claire, she's a killer," Hart sighed. "If she hurts him, that's on me. That's my license." "Give him a week," Claire pleaded, stepping between them. "1 week. If she shows aggression or doesn't settle, we do it next Friday." Dr. Hart looked at the boy, then at the mare pacing in the background. Sensing the tension, he shook his head, defeated. "1 week," he grunted. "But Ezra, you do not enter that paddock. You stay on this side of the fence." Ezra gave a single sharp nod. The truck drove away, taking the lethal injection with it. The clock was ticking. Ezra moved his life to the fence. He ate there, did schoolwork there. He watched Stormy and she watched him. He noticed the pattern immediately. Stormy wasn't pacing aimlessly, she was patrolling. She walked a specific circuit, always returning to the far corner, a tangled mess of blackberry brambles surrounding a collapsed equipment shed. When a bird flew too close, she charged. When a ranch hand walked past, she threw herself against the rails, and she would back her hindquarters into the thickest brambles and stand perfectly still, hidden for 20 minutes at a time. "She's territorial," Claire observed that evening. "Aggressive, resource guarding." Ezra didn't answer. It didn't look like greed to him. It looked desperate, like sentry duty. On Saturday evening, barely 30 hours after the reprieve, the sky broke open. Not just rain, but a deluge. Thunder shook the ground, lightning tore the sky apart. "Ezra, get away from the window," Claire called, but Ezra was watching the paddock. A lightning flash turned night to day for a split second. In that illumination, he saw her. Stormy wasn't in the shelter. She was standing in the far corner by the brambles, positioned broadside to the driving wind and rain, standing over the collapsed shed opening. She was soaked, head lowered, using herself as a shield. "She's going to get sick," Claire muttered. "Why won't she go in?" "She's not stupid," Ezra whispered. He grabbed a heavy flashlight and yanked the door open. Claire shouted. But he was already outside. The wind nearly knocked him over, the freezing rain strung like needles. He ran to the paddock, slipped inside the gate and fought his way through the thorns toward the shed. Stormy saw him. She turned, ears pinned, but didn't charge. She nickered, a high, shrill sound of distress. She looked at him, then back at the shed, then back at him. She was begging. Ezra dropped to his knees in the mud, shining the light under the precariously leaning beams. At first only trash and rot. Then something moved. A small brown shape curled in a hollow of dry earth, protected by the debris in Stormy's body. It was a foal. A tiny bay colt, rib-thin, shivering violently, eyes crusty with infection. He was too weak to lift his head. He must have slipped out during the chaotic arrival and hidden here, terrified. The truth hit Ezra with the force of the thunder overhead. Stormy wasn't a monster, she was a mother. Her aggression, her violence, it had all been a desperate, frantic attempt to keep predators away from her dying child. She had starved herself, standing guard in the rain, taking the world's abuse to buy this foal one more hour of life. Stormy lowered her head, nudging Ezra's shoulder with her wet muzzle. She rumbled low in her chest, a sound of profound relief. "You see him? I've got him," Ezra choked out, rain mixing with his tears. He crawled into the dangerous space, scooped the foal into his arms, a shockingly light bundle of bones, and dragged him out, shielding him with his jacket. Stormy immediately began to lick the foal's face, frantic with worry. Ezra screamed, his voice finding its full power for the first time, cutting through the wind. Lights came on. Claire and a ranch hand came running. When they saw Ezra in the mud clutching the foal with the dangerous killer mare standing gently over them, nuzzling Ezra's hair, Claire covered her mouth. "Oh my word," she whispered. The next hours were a blur. They moved them to a foaling stall in the main barn. Dr. Hart was called back. Grumpy and wet, he fell silent when he saw the stall. He worked quickly, inserting an IV line, administering antibiotics and warm fluids. The foal, whom Ezra named Ember, was critical. "Dehydrated, septic, and starving," Hart murmured. "The mare has no milk. He's been surviving on sheer will." Ezra sat in the corner of the stall, watching. Stormy stood over Ember, watching Dr. Hart. She didn't strike, she seemed to understand. Every so often she would look at Ezra and blink slowly, a gesture of trust. Dr. Hart stood up, stripping off his gloves. He looked at the mare, then at Ezra. "I was wrong," he said, his voice gruff. "I looked at the teeth and the hooves. You looked at the soul." Ezra just reached out and stroked Ember's neck. The foal sighed and closed his eyes. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, under the warm light, it was quiet and safe. Weeks passed. The transformation was miraculous. Ember became a fighter, a nuisance in the best way, full of energy. Stormy healed, her coat gleaming, her eyes free of pain. But the biggest change was in Ezra. He spent his days in the round pen, using the language of body and breath his mother had taught him. He wasn't just training a horse, he was rebuilding himself. He began to laugh, to talk, to live again. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, a sleek black pickup with a 4-horse trailer arrived. The door bore a gold script logo, Francis Ranch S1920. A woman in her 60s, Sarah Francis, stepped out, her face etched with deep sorrow. "I believe you have 2 of my horses," she said, her voice clipped. They led her to the paddock. When Sarah saw the mare, her composure broke. "Tempest," she whispered, her hand at her throat. Then Ember stood up, stretching. Sarah grabbed the fence rail, her knuckles white. She made a sound, half gasp, half sob. "We know," Ezra said, stepping forward, his voice strong. "She found him." "You don't understand," Sarah said, tears streaming. "That foal, that's Obsidian's son, my stallion, he died in the fire." She wept openly, her grief mirroring Ezra's own. But then came the business. She had the papers, the proof. Legally they were hers, she wanted to take them home. "I can't," Ezra said, panic rising. "She trusts me." "Son, I will compensate your aunt," Sarah said, softening. "But these are valuable animals, they belong at my ranch." The law was absolute. The loading process was a funeral march. Ezra, hands shaking, led Stormy to the massive trailer. She stopped at the ramp, planted her feet, and looked at him. "Where are we going?" Ezra pressed his forehead against hers. "You have to go," he whispered, voice breaking. "You saved me, Stormy. You showed me I could speak again. You have to go home now." He kissed her nose, tears mixing with the fine hair of her muzzle. "Be a good girl." He stepped back, trying to hand the laid rope to Mrs. Francis. Stormy didn't move. She turned, looking at Ezra, then the dark trailer, then back at Ezra. She let out a low, anxious whinny and took a step toward him, burying her face in his chest. Sarah Francis stood holding the rope, but she didn't pull. She watched the boy. She watched the way the horse looked at him as if he were her center of gravity. She saw the bond forged in shared trauma and healing. She looked past Ezra to the porch, to the life being rebuilt. She looked at her own empty hands. "My granddaughter Bella," Sarah said suddenly into the wind. "She's your age, 16. She was in the barn with my husband when the fire started. He got her out." Ezra went still. He knew that story. He knew that weight. "Bella hasn't touched a horse since," Sarah continued, looking at Stormy. "She sits in her room with the curtains drawn. She's fading away." Sarah dropped the lead rope. It fell into the dust with a soft puff. "I can take these horses back," she said, looking Ezra in the eye with intensity. "I can hire the best trainers, but I can't heal them and they can't heal Bella." She took a step closer. "That mare chose you." She pulled a business card from her pocket, handing it to Aunt Claire. "I'm not taking them, not today and not without you," she said to Ezra. "I'm rebuilding my herd. I have 20 horses that survived, all traumatized, all scared. I need someone who understands what they're going through, someone who has walked through the fire. I want to hire you for the summer. You and your aunt, bring Stormy, bring Ember. Come to my ranch, help me rehabilitate the herd, and maybe—" Ezra looked at her offered hand. He looked at Aunt Claire's tearful, smiling face. He looked at Stormy, nudging his pocket for a treat. He took Sarah's hand. "I'd like that," he said, his voice steady. 6 months later, Montana summer bled into golden autumn. New barn frames rose from the ashes at the Francis Ranch, smelling of fresh pine. Out in the west pasture, there was only the sound of wind and the rhythmic thud of hooves. Ezra rode Stormy with no saddle, just a rope halter moving as one being. Beside them, Ember galloped with leggy joy. Riding next to Ezra on a steady gelding was a girl with dark hair, Bella, her hands relaxed on the reins, her eyes slowly learning to smile again. Near the fence, Aunt Claire stood, the rescue now secure. Next to her was a man Ezra hadn't seen smile in a long time, his father, David. Ezra turned Stormy toward the fence and slid off. David walked up and touched the mare's nose. He looked at his son, tan, strong, eyes clear. "Mom would have loved her," Ezra said softly. David saw the echo of his wife in Ezra's gentle hands, in his quiet strength. The grief was still a stone in his pocket, but no longer a crushing boulder. "She would have," David whispered, his voice thick. He reached over the fence and gripped Ezra's shoulder. Ezra smiled. He swung back onto Stormy's back. He looked at Bella, who gave a shy nod. He looked at Ember chasing a butterfly. Then he looked out at the horizon where the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. He asked. Bella nodded. Ezra leaned forward, whispering into Stormy's ear. The three of them, the boy, the girl, and the horses scarred by fire, took off into the golden light. They ran not to escape the past, but to chase the future. Proof that even when the world burns down, life, stubborn and beautiful, finds a way to grow from the ashes. If this story of courage and connection moved you, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder of hope. Off. David walked up and touched the mare's nose. He looked at his son, tan, strong, eyes clear. "Mom would have loved her," Ezra said softly. David saw the echo of his wife in Ezra's gentle hands, in his quiet strength. The grief was still a stone in his pocket, but no longer a crushing boulder. "She would have," David whispered, his voice thick. He reached over the fence and gripped Ezra's shoulder. "But more than that, she would have loved who you've become." Ezra smiled. He swung back onto Stormy's back. He looked at Bella, who gave a shy nod. He looked at Ember chasing a butterfly. Then he looked out at the horizon where the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. "Ready?" he asked. Bella nodded. "Ready?" Ezra leaned forward, whispering into Stormy's ear. "Let's fly." The three of them, the boy, the girl, and the horses scarred by fire, took off into the golden light. They ran not to escape the past, but to chase the future. Proof that even when the world burns down, Life, stubborn and beautiful, finds a way to grow from the ashes. If this story of courage and connection moved you, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring tale. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder of hope.